When people talk about Adam and Eve's descendants, Cain and Abel usually steal the spotlight. But do you know Adam and Eve had other children besides these two? Yes, they do. And who are they? Why didn't the Bible tell us much about them? Who are their descendants? To uncover their fascinating story, we'll dig into sources like the Book of Jubilees, the Holy Bible, and ancient traditions. So, stick with me to the end because you're about to discover the mysteries surrounding their identities. The Adam and Eve story is pretty familiar, right? You'll find the record in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Even if you're not religious, you've likely heard the basics. God created Adam. Eve comes from Adam's rib. Satan tricks them into eating the forbidden fruit. God got angry, kicked them out of Eden, and after that, you have the Cain and Abel drama. For most people, that's where their knowledge of the story stops. If you're looking at just the Bible or Torah, there's not much more detail. According to some lesser-known texts, like the Book of the Daughters of Adam, the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan, and the Book of Jubilees, Adam and Eve had way more children than just Cain and Abel. In fact, more than 5. If you were a diligent student in Sunday school, you might recall that Adam and Eve had another son after Cain killed Abel, and his name was Seth. But that's not all. The King James Bible says, "And the days of Adam after he had begotten Seth were 800 years, and he begat sons and daughters." Genesis 5:4. Wait a minute. Daughters, sons. Definitely not one. When did that happen? Let's uncover the secret tale of Adam and Eve's daughters. They had daughters with names like Luluwa and Aklia and many more. In fact, they had dozens of daughters, making their family a whole lot more intriguing than you might have imagined. It might surprise you to learn that the Bible isn't just one unchanging book. It actually took the early Christian church over 400 years to figure out which stories should make the cut. During that time, many new Christians wrote texts that didn't end up in the final version of the Bible. One of these texts was the Book of the Daughters of Adam. We don't know exactly when it was written, but we do know that Pope Gelasius mentioned it in 494 on a list of texts that the church didn't approve of. This means it must have been around before then, possibly even before the official Bible was put together. For hundreds of years, people have been writing about Adam and his family. You can find these stories in the Jewish Book of Jubilees and the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan, which was included in the Forgotten Books of Eden in 1926. Clearly, people wanted to know more about the daughters of Adam and Eve. This text is pretty clear about when Adam and Eve's first daughter comes into the picture. After their expulsion from Eden, and when Eve becomes pregnant, she goes into labor, just like in the Bible. But while the Bible tells us that Eve gave birth to a son, the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan says something different. According to this text, the first ever birth on earth resulted in twins, and one of them was a girl. After 8 days, the text tells us that Adam and Eve finally started naming their children. They named the boy Cain, which is consistent with the Bible. However, the girl was named Luluwa, although the Book of Jubilees suggests her name might have been Awan. Her name Luluwa means beautiful because she was even more beautiful than Eve. Interestingly, the text mentions that Cain, whose name means hater, already disliked his sister while they were still in the womb. Adam and Eve had to do more than just raise 2 kids to populate the entire world. According to the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan, after Eve weaned Cain and Luluwa, the story says further that she conceived again and gave birth to another son and daughter, and they named the son Abel and the daughter Aklia. An interesting detail at the end of the chapter in the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan about Abel and Aklia's birth is that it mentions that Eve stopped bearing children for that time being until after Abel's murder, when she gives birth to Seth as a kind of replacement. This text suggests that she only had 5 children: Cain, Luluwa, Abel, Aklia, and Seth. This directly contradicts what is in the Bible and other Jewish texts. Jewish tradition records even more details about Adam and Eve's offspring. According to one of the records, they had a total of 56 children, 33 sons and 23 daughters. This aligns with God's command to be fruitful and multiply, as having just 5 children wouldn't have fulfilled that directive. Interestingly, the Bible actually hints at this, though it's often overlooked. According to Genesis 5:4, after Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. That's right. While the official version of the Bible doesn't mention Luluah or Aklia, it does state that Adam went on to have daughters and sons. In 800 years, you can have a lot of children. According to the scriptures, Adam and Eve could have had as many children as possible in those number of years. A question most Bible readers have not found an answer to is, where did Cain's wife come from? Let's attempt to demystify that question. It seems like he suddenly has a wife, even though, up to that point, the only people mentioned in the story are Adam, Eve, and Cain, with Abel having been murdered. Sir, where did this wife come from unless he married his mother? But if Cain had a sister or sisters, then he had other options. You might be thinking, did Cain marry his sister? That sounds strange. Well, it's not as unusual as it might initially seem. According to the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan, Luluah was somehow connected to Abel's death, although that seems a bit unfair. The story suggests that Cain, who initially disliked her, became upset when he heard that Adam and Eve planned for Luluah to marry Abel, while Cain was left with Aklia, Abel's twin sister. Cain wasn't happy about this because Luluah was apparently much more attractive than her sister. In the Bible, after Cain killed Abel and was banished to wander in the land of Nod. Now, could it have been that a seemingly mysterious, unnamed wife appeared in his life there? Because the Bible says further, "And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. And he built a city, and called the name of the city, after the name of his son, Enoch." Genesis 4:17. This is the first and last time she's mentioned, seemingly materializing out of nowhere, without even a name. However, the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan provides a more detailed account. Adam and Eve were deeply saddened by one son killing the other, but from Cain's perspective, things seemed to work out, as he ended up marrying his twin sister Luluah. It's noted that his parents couldn't prevent this union due to their heavy hearts over the loss of Abel. This text doesn't mention the land of Nod, but states that Cain took Luluah with him to a place near where he killed Abel, which is quite unsettling. Since the world needed to be populated, things got even more complicated for Luluah. Despite his punishment for killing Abel, Cain appeared to have learned little from his past mistakes. He sounds like a terrible husband and brother, and Luluah would have been in a difficult situation. While Cain accumulated much wealth in Enoch, he did so through violence, robbery, and pillaging. He became a great leader of men, leading them into wicked paths. He invented systems like weights, measures, and property boundaries, which may sound impressive. Still, it led people away from innocence and toward cunning craftiness. It wouldn't be wrong to say that Luluah married a seemingly important figure in the city, living a wealthy life, but one built on wrongdoing. With Abel deceased and Cain banished, Aklia had no more brothers to marry. After Adam and Eve took 7 years to cope with their grief, they decided to have another child, and this time it was a son named Seth. According to the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan, when Seth was 9, Satan came to tempt him. However, Seth didn't yield to temptation and went home to tell his parents. Adam, in response, decided that his son needed a wife to keep him on the right path and ensure he wouldn't succumb to Satan's temptations in the future. This might seem like a lot of responsibility to place on a wife, expecting her to prevent her husband from falling for Satan's tricks, but those were different times. The only available wife for Seth was Aklia, who happened to be Abel's twin. Seth agreed to the marriage and married his sister, Aklia. You can imagine the rest of the story. Thank you for joining us today. As we conclude our journey through the wonders of the Word, remember that faith is a light that guides us through life's darkest moments. If you found this video inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more enlightening content. Keep walking in faith, and we'll see you in the next video. Until then, may God's blessings shine upon you.